So now I'm going to record the Ayin Aleph Part 2. We were holding in the middle of a topic, and let's nail it again. There was a kasha. The kasha was Reb Zera or Reb Asi were asked, what happens if somebody does a half a shear of malacha having forgotten it's Shabbos, and a half a shear of malacha having forgotten the malacha is Aser? Would it combine to be mechayev and machatas? Their answer was that since if somebody does a shear having forgotten that it's Shabbos and a full shear having forgotten that the malacha is Aser, it would be two separate chatois. So you see that Helam Shabbos and Helam Malachas are so different that they're mechayev you two separate chatois. So therefore, if they're so different, a half a shear done behelim Shabbos and a half a shear done behelim Malacha is not going to combine to one chatas. So the Gemara asked the kasha. The Mishnah in Krisa says that if you eat a half a shear of chaylev and another half a shear of chaylev, b'chdei chilas pras you're chayev. Isn't that obvious? So what was the teretz? Aliba de Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua holds that if you eat a kazayis of chaylev that's fried and another kazayis of chaylev that's roasted, fried and roasted are so different that you're chayev two chatois. Kamash malon, even though fried and roasted are so different that it's two chatois, but a half a fried of roasted and a half a kazayis of fried and half a kazayis of roasted will combine. So what's the moral of the story? That although they're so different that they're mechayev you two chatois, yet if it's a half a share of each, it combines. So the same thing should be about Helam Shabbos and Helam Malacha. Even though they're so different that a full shear would be two chatois, but two half shiurim should combine. And that's where we're up to. Amar Le Mar Aresha Masnila. 5 lines in the bottom. Amar Le, so Rish Lakish, so the Gemara answers, Mar, either of Asi or of Zera answered, Mar Aresha Masnila, the Kashalei. You learned that teretz of Rish Lakish on the Reisha, and you have a difficulty. Anana Seifa Masninallah. I learned Rish Lakish's answer on the Seifa, and it's perfectly exactly what I said. V'lai Kashal, and there's no Kasha. The kasha was a different kasha. Mishnei minim pater tzrich l'meimar. Tell me, my friends, if you eat a half a zayis of chaylev and half a zayis of pigel, is there a chiddush that it doesn't combine? Of course it doesn't combine. So v'amar Rish Lakish b'shem Bar Tutni. So Bar Tutni explained. So Rish Lakish b'shem Bar Tutni explained. Lo'ila mimin echad. We're not talking about a half a gazayis of chaylev and half a gazayis of pigel. We're talking about half a gazayis of chaylev and half a gazayis of chaylev. My correlation minim. So why did you call that two different kinds? Shachole b'shnei tamchuyin. It was two different preparations. It was a half a gazayis of fried and a half a gazayis of roasted. And for Rabbi Yeshua, it's the very Rabbi Yeshua that we're talking about, Damar tamchuyin mechalkin, that says had you eaten a kazayis of roasted and a kazayis of fried, it would be two chatois. Kamash malan, v'kamash malan, as the Amar Rabbi Yeshua bein lekula bein lechumra. Rabbi Yeshua's fried and roasted are different, and therefore a kazayis of each will be mechayev two chatois, and a half a zayis of each are so different that they're not mitzdarif. That's what the Mishnah meant when it said a half a zayis of chaylev and half a zayis of two minim is not mitzdarif. It didn't mean chaylev and noiser. It meant a half a kazayis of fried and half a kazayis of roasted, and it's not mitzdarif because exactly of the principle that I said. If they're so different that if you do a shear of each, it's two chatois, then they're so different that a half a shear of each will not combine. So so you're telling me that if you have, let's say, half a zayis of chaylev and another half a zayis of chaylev, one half fried and one half roasted, it's not mitzdarif. So miklal the reisha, so in the reisha when it is mitzdarif, what is that talking about? Min echad v'tamchu yechad. It's speaking a half a gazais of chaylev and another half a gazais of chaylev, and they're both either fried or cooked or roasted, both prepared the same way. So min echad v'tamchu yechad tzrich l'meimar. So if it's the same iser prepared the same way, what's the chiddush that if you had a half plus a half b'chdei achilas pras it's mitzdaref? Rav Huna says hacham b'ma'askin, and the chiddush is gan sha'isa le'yediyah bein asayim v'ragamli le'damer ein yediyah l'chatzi shir. We know that if a man eats a shear and then he realizes that he did an aveira and then he does another shear, so it's going to be another chatas. And every time you have a yediyah between one and the other, you're chayav another chatas. Rogmlil has a chiddush and he says if you eat a half a shear, then you realize you did something wrong, and then you eat another half a shear, that knowledge in between does not separate between the two half zaysim, because knowledge is only knowledge which is a knowledge of guilt. But after half a zayis, there's no guilt. So the chiddush is that a half a zayis plus a half a zayis is mitztarif. What's the chiddush? If it both are chaylev and both were fried, that they were prepared the same way, what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that even though you realize between one half and the other half that you ate chaylev, it's not mechalik, ein yediyah lechatzi shir. There's no yediyah that's going to be mechalik between the two halves when you only ate a chatzi shir, because the only yediyah that's mechalik is only a yediyah of liability. And after eating half a zayis, there's no yediyah of liability. Now we start a similar piece but different. Itmer, it was said, if somebody ate a kazayis at 9 o'clock and a kazayis at 10 o'clock, and he had a lapse of memory, he didn't know you're not allowed to eat chaylev. Eventually he realized al arisha, and he realizes about the 9 o'clock, and then afterwards then afterwards he realizes that he did it again at 10 o'clock. Rabbi Yochanan Chayiv Shtayim. Rabbi Yochanan says you chayiv 2 chatois. Rish Lakish Amar Ein chayiv alachas. Rish Lakish says you only chayiv 1 chatas. Explain. Rabbi Yochanan Chayiv, because the pasuk says you should bring al chatasai per sin. Vehevi, you should bring a korban. So what does per sin mean? You sinned at 9 and you sinned at 10. But everybody knows that if there was no knowledge between 9 and 10, you're only going to be chayiv 1 chatas. So Rabbi Yochanan, but if there was knowledge first about your sin at 9, and then again there was knowledge about the sin of 10, so therefore you chayiv 2 chatois. Rish Lakish B'Amar Potter, Rish Lakish says you only chayiv 1 chatas, mechatas v'nislach loy, because the pasuk says mechatas, which means that as long as you're mechaper for part, you're mechaper for all. So therefore, if you found out that you ate chaylev at 9, even though afterwards you found out that you ate chaylev at 10, but 9 and 10 were done in the same lapse of memory, and the same korban will be mechaper. The Gemara asks, Rish Lakish oksiv al chatasai vehevi. According to Rish Lakish, doesn't it say something about bringing a korban per sin? So Yahul achar kapora, of course. What happens if you realized you ate chaylev at 9 and you brought a korban for it? No, if you brought a korban for it, it's kaput, and you didn't know that you had 8 chaylev at 10. If afterwards you realize you ate chaylev at 10, you have to bring another korban. So for sure there it's going to be a chatas per sin, because you already brought the chatas for sin A, and it's not mechaper for sin B, because you didn't know about it when you brought the korban. According to Rabbi Yochanan, doesn't it say if you're mechaper for part, you're mechaper for all? So when would he agree that one korban will be mechaper for all? A complex case. We're talking on shachal kazayis amechza. He ate 1.5 kazaysim, v'noidolay al kazayis, and he realized that he ate kazayis 1.0, but he doesn't know about the 0.5. And then he eats another 0.5 when he's still under the same lapse of memory as the first 0.5. I would think that since he realized the 1.0 and didn't realize the 0.5, and the first 0.5 and the second 0.5 were in the same lapse of memory, maybe the 2 0.5s will now combine to another korban. Kamash malan. What's the kamash malan? That since he realized he sinned on the kazayis, which was 1.0, what was left was only a 0.5. So therefore, even though he didn't know about the 0.5, but since 0.5 is such a minimal amount, it gets included in the korban of the 1.0. And therefore, the 0.5a and the 0.5b do not combine, and you're niskaper with one korban. So before we go forward, let me set something up so it should go easier. So it is clear that according to Rish Lakish, and even according to Rish Lakish, when you brought a korban for sin A, and then you realize you did sin B, you'll have to bring another one. And it's clear, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's clear that if you brought a korban for 1.0, but you didn't, if you realized 1.0 and didn't realize the 0.5, but the 0.5 is wiped away, the 0.5 disappears, and therefore even if you have another 0.5, the 2 0.5s don't add up to 1, because you already realized on the 1.0. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, so Ravina now asks Ravashi an interesting shaila. This yadale koydem afrasha pligi. What's the argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, where he knew that he did sin A, and then afterwards he realized he did sin B, but he never was mafresh a korban for sin A? The Mar Sover, the dispute is Mar Sover Yedias Machalkais, since in the Torah it says Hoida Elav Chatasai. So Rabbi Yochanan holds knowledge that you sinned, that's one liability, and when you'll find out afterwards that you sinned in B, that's another liability. Umar Sover Afroshas Machalkais. Rish Lakish holds, had you set aside a korban for A, I would agree it would be mechaper for A, not for B. But just Yedi alone is not mechalik. Aval afrosha, but if had you set aside a korban for A, Maidele Rish Lakish le Rabbi Yochanan the Chayiv Shtayim, would Rish Lakish agree that once you set aside a korban for A, it's not going to cover for B, if you're not aware at the time that you set aside the korban that you sinned with B? Or maybe this Yadele Lachar Afrosha Pligi, or maybe it's speaking that you already did the Afrosha for A, and Baha Pligi, and they argue, Mar Savar Afroshas Machalkas, Rabbi Yochanan holds, since you set aside the korban for A, and only knew about A, it doesn't mechaper for B. Umar Sava Kaporis Mechalkas. Rish Lakish holds only had you brought the korban for A and didn't know of B, it wouldn't cover for B. Avokaydam Afrosha, but let's say if all you have is knowledge that you sinned about A, but you never were mafresh a korban, Maidle Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan would be Maida, then a Chayiv Alachas. That you only Chayiv one, Oidil Bein Bezu Machlekes. Let me explain. Again, they're arguing Rabbi Yochanan holds two, Rish Lakish holds one. It is clear Rish Lakish holds two. Once you brought a korban for A, and only then you find out that you send B, for sure it's two. Rabbi Yochanan also says that if you brought a korban for 1.0 and didn't know about the 0.5, the 0.5 just disappears, and 0.5 plus 0.5 is not going to be mechayiv another korban. The issue is what happens if you had knowledge that you sinned in A, and then you had again knowledge when you sinned in B. Would Rabbi Yochanan hold even in that case it's two chatois? Or does Rabbi Yochanan only hold it's two chatois if you made a hafrasha for A and didn't have in mind for B? But Yediyah alone, Rabbi Yochanan would hold is nothing. Or vice versa. Rish Lakish holds that it's all one korban. Is it only one korban because all you had was Yediyah? Would he admit if there was hafrasha, if you were mafresh a korban for A, then it's too late and you'll have to be mafresh another korban for B? Or does he hold even for hafrasha, it'll be one korban? Amar Leis, or Rav Ashi answers, maybe I should explain the Gemara's teretz outside before I do it inside. I said already 3 times that Rish Lakish said he's maida that if you brought the korban for A, you're not nischaper for B. Now, why did Rish Lakish have to say that? If Rish Lakish would have held that even if you're mafresh the korban for A, it's going to be 2 korbanos, then he didn't have to go so far to say that if you brought the korban for A, you're going to have to bring another korban. He should have said even for Afrasha, you'll have to bring another korban. So evidently, Rish Lakish holds that even by Afrasha, it's all going to be the same korban, or vice versa. Since Rabbi Yochanan said the only time it's one is if you are mafresh a korban for 1.0, and then the 0.5 and 0.5 don't add up to another korban. If Rabbi Yochanan would have been maida, if all you had was a yediyah about korban A, that already is if Rabbi Yochanan would have held that only Afrasha separates between A and B, but Yediyah alone doesn't separate, Rabbi Yochanan should have said that even if you had a Yediyah between A and B, that also would be one korban. Why did Rabbi Yochanan have to go so far to say that only when you had a Yediyah of 1 and you didn't know about the 0.5, then you're going to be covered with one korban? If Rabbi Yochanan would have held that if you knew about A but hadn't been mafresh a korban, then you can also, when you realize that it's B, put it into the same korban. So you should have said that. It's logical. I think that Rish Lakish will hold that it's one korban even if you made a hafrasha, and Rabbi Yochanan hold it will be 2 korbanos even if all you had was a yediyah. Because these because if it would enter your mind koydem hafrasha pligi, that they're only arguing on koydem hafrasha aval achar hafrasha. But if you are mafresh the korban for A, moidle Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan the Chayiv Shtayim, Rish Lakish is moide that it's 2, is adamukin lekro lachar kapara. Why did Rish Lakish have to say the pasuk al chatase, which means a chatas per sin, is speaking only lachar kapara? Look me lachar hafrasha. He could have said, if he would have held that way, he should have said that even lachar hafrasha is going to be 2 korbanos. On the other hand, the achar hafrasha pligi, if they only argue achar hafrasha, avol kaidem hafrasha, but if all you had was a yediyah that you did sin A, and then afterwards you had a yediyah of sin B, moidle Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish then chayv alachas, Rabbi Yochanan would be moidle to Rish Lakish that it's only one, adamukim lekra, because I samachza look me kaidem hafrasha. Why did Rabbi Yochanan have to say that the only case that he agrees that it's one korban is only if you were mafresh a korban for 1.0? And then all he had left was a 0.5 and 0.5. He could have said that I agree, I feel if you have a yediyah between 1 and 2, I also agree that it's going to be only one korban. Elamai must be that they argue, Afila, if you're mafresh the korban, Rish Lakish holds it's still one korban. Rabbi Yochanan holds even if all you had was a yediyah, it's going to be 2 korbanos, and therefore Rish Lakish only had, the only case Rish Lakish had that it's 2 is if you already brought the kapara for A, and Rabbi Yochanan the only case that he could say it's 1 is if you brought if you knew about 1.0 and were not aware of the 0.5. Gemara says Shkaraya. Dumasfuki misafkale. Maybe when the Gemara had Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan be so diametrically opposed, maybe because we weren't sure. Vim Tim Tzalaimer Kamar. We said, what if? Im Tim Tzalaimer Kaidam Afrasha Pligi Bar Rabbi Yochanan Heichemukim Leilekra. If Rabbi Yochanan would hold that a fila yediyah would be machalik if he knew about A, he has to bring another carbon for B. So then, how do you have one carbon? The answer is because I samachza. In that case, Rabbi Yochanan agrees. And if capital I, if Rish Lakish holds a fila lachar afrasha, it's all going to be one carbon. Then Rish Lakish heichemukim leilekra. How does Rish Lakish agree? When does he agree that it's two carbonas? But lachar kapara. So sure is sure. Lachar kapara for sure it's two. If it's if he ate a kazayis samachza and he realized he ate the kazayis, so for sure it's going to be only one. The other half is not going to count, and it won't add up with another half. Now, what are they arguing about? I'm not sure. Maybe a fila, if there's only a yediyah, Rabbi Yochanan holds it's two, and maybe even if there was a afrasha for A, Rish Lakish still holds it's one. I'm going to try to get into the Dvar Torah if I can. The Gemara asked the kasha, if you ate a half a zayis of chaylev and half a zayis of dam, so the Mishnah in Krisa says it doesn't add up. So l'chayra, the Gemara asks pshita, what does chaylev have to do with dam? So Rish Lakish said it's speaking about two kazayim of chaylev, half is fried and half was cooked. Taisvis asks, there's a Gemara in Zvochem that kol yisurim shebatarim mitzdarfen l'malkis. There's a loisa say loisaychel kol tayeva. So if a person eats a half a zayis of one iser and half a zayis of another iser, he's chayv malchus for loisaychel kol tayeva. So maybe that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, that even though half a zayis and half a zayis b'mezid of two different isurim, it's mitzdarf l'malchus, but it's b'shoigig, it's not mitzdarf for achatas. So why does the Mishnah have to tell us that? So Hasem says a brilliant teretz. Says, there's a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan holds chatzi shir is aser min hatayra. Rish Lakish holds chatzi shir is mutar min hatayra. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah holds, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if chatzi shir is asur min hatayra, the one can call it tayeva. So therefore, if the chatzi shir of chaylev and a chatzi shir of dam, so chatzi shir plus chatzi shir is a kazayis of tayeva, so you'll be chayv malchus. But Rish Lakish holds that a chatzi shir is mutar min hatayra, so you can't call a chatzi shir tayeva. It's mutar min hatayra. So how could chatzi shir and chatzi shir of two different isurim be mitzdarif? This is not a tayeva and this is not a tayeva. Is mainly here our sugi is aliba de Rish Lakish. Therefore, according to Rish Lakish, the kasha was, isn't it obvious that a half and a half doesn't add up? Valtaimarli, that a half and a half adds up for loisechel kol tayeva, because that's only according to Rabbi Yochanan, the chatzi shir is also min hatayra. But according to Rish Lakish, chatzi shir is not also min hatayra. How is it possible that a half and a half would add up? And the teretz was, I would have had a havamina, that a half fried and a half roasted might add up. Kamash Malan, the Rabbi Shua holds, fried and roasted is so far apart that if you had a kazayis of fried and a kazayis of roasted, you have two chatois, so half and a half also is apart and it doesn't add up. But to tell me that there's a chiddush that you're not chayav for l'aseichel kol te'eva, according to Rish Lakish, was impossible, because Rish Lakish holds chatzi shir as mutar min hatayra. Have a good Shabbos. I know this block was a bit more complex. I hope I explained it properly. Kol tiv. Be well, everybody. Stay healthy.